I want to actually carry on from your point there about incidents. So we'll go into that in a bit more detail in terms of what we at Kudelski Security experience on a daily basis. So we've got a 70-year history. We've been trying to fight off threat actors before the internet became mainstream. So content protection, digital protection, and cryptography was where we started. It's a global organization, different parts of the business. We're outside, so do come and see us if you want more information. I won't go into the detail. The Cyber Fusion Center and the cybersecurity part of the business started in 2012. And what we saw was in the enterprise space, there was more and more a need for subject matter expertise. We pride ourselves on innovation and partnership. It's an engineering company. I've been with them about 3 years, and I can see the subject matter expertise that we have. We have teams across the globe that serve enterprise customers, and hopefully what you've been learning up until now, you'll see a bit of that in detail on how we actually get involved. When actually, if you think about what you've been listening to, the teams outside speaking to you about how they can help you, I like to think of it as kind of left of breach, left of incident. So the preparation, the planning, have we got the right tooling? Have we got the awareness in place? But what happens when the kind of alert comes in where it's a well-known threat actor, a nation state, dare I say it? How do you deal with that? And it's, as we've seen here in the UK, especially in the last 2 years, you've really seen it at the forefront of the headlines. National Cybersecurity Center continually highlighting the threat of ransomware groups and ransomware as a service and how it's coming at our public services, right? Hospitals, academia. So what we've started, I mean, you're probably seeing the same things in terms of the trends. We're still continuing to see that shortage in where, how do you translate technical risk, digital impact, business outcome or lack of? That seems to continually be a challenge, and it's not our fault. I say our because we're a community, right? We're the defense community. We try and keep our organizations safe or watertight as much as possible. But we've notoriously always been that team that says no to everything. So over time, yes, we've got a seat at the table, so to speak, where cyber has become a much more prevalent topic. But you still see that challenge of how do you bring the organization on more of a journey as you try to improve your security program. The continual pressures of regulatory, identity being the new perimeter, where does your supply chain start and stop, and how do you manage that attack surface is continuing to become more of a problem, I would say. As organizations have matured in standard security controls, there's these new emerging threats that are coming through because people are working from different places. Your supply chain is not what it used to be. There's so many more partners you're working with. So all of these things combined translate into a lot of incidents. So detection is always great, but the response capability, what kind of resiliency do you have in place, and resiliency from a technical and a people point of view of getting out of that incident. So how are you able to respond? So we do more than 100 investigations a year, and these are like real, once you've done all the triage on whatever platform you're using to see the alerts, how that then gets passed on to our incident response team. That's something that we do on a regular basis. And what I would say here is, time and time it's proven that whilst tech is great, and it does do amazing things, having the experience and the knowledge from an incident response point of view to know what techniques and tactics these threat actors are using. Because a lot of them, they're just human beings like us. They repeat the same things and they make mistakes. How do you spot that? How do you look at when someone's gone and left a back door open of a particular environment and be able to then close that off or advise organizations on how to treat with that is absolutely key. And that's where the human aspect comes into place. And as an organization, we work closely from an advisory standpoint then to something that Sarah was talking about earlier on the recovery and the remediation side. So once you've understood the blast radius, how much impact has happened in a particular breach, what do you do with that? How do you move forward? In terms of recovery and limiting the impact is something that our teams also get involved with as well. I think numbers always help shape where we are, where we're heading to, but also, I would say at a contrast, what it's still allowing threat actors to do. So the chart on the I guess your left that you can see is tooling and investment in tooling is continuing to grow year on year. It's not stopping, right? We're all spending a lot of money fighting for budget, and we need coverage here, we need to cover that log source, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see the trajectory, and it's not expected to stop. What's interesting, though, is going back to the point about techniques that threat actors are using, you are still seeing them being so successful. So I think, the pandemic era was a free rein, right? There were so many open goals because of the panic we had and the adrenaline of, we're not going to stop. We're going to continue working and serving. And it allowed folks to come in on the other side and exploit the vulnerabilities and get in. But then you see how, as that happened, with the conflict that took place, that started, I should say, back in 2022 with Ukraine and Russia, the Conti ransomware group got broken down. That had a social impact and a people impact on that organization, right? They were realizing big numbers up until that point. And these organizations are comprised of HR, they have media teams, like they're a proper outfit. But they didn't rest on their laurels. So even in 2022, you saw a significant dip in how much revenue, if you like, was realized. The innovation they did on the ransomware types and traits, they came back hard in 2023. Over $1 billion was realized just from ransomware activity in 2023. And I suspect it's more than that. That was just looking at some core groups. But what it taught us was, these guys don't have change controls to worry about. They don't need permission from the business application owner to go and do stuff. And as some of you, unfortunately, will have experienced, it always happens at a time when it's skeleton staff. Holiday season, late in the evening, that's when they'll come, they'll adapt, they'll also use tools that are best practice tools so that the alerting doesn't trigger. And it's a bit of a split. 50% of the cases we work with, they were emergency IR cases where they didn't have any EDR. So it tells you that the tooling does do something. But then there were 50% where EDR was in place. So then you have to look at the approach and the techniques that were used to do that. So I'm going to go into a little bit of an insight on, as I said, what the team sees day to day. A ransomware group that you will have been very familiar with earlier this year because of some of the tactics that they've been using, but also how the power of collaboration in our community was able to bring impact. So Lockbit, as you know, and it's debatable, are they still around? Have they rebranded? There's a lot of debate around that. There's a lot of claim to say that they're still there. But in this particular case, what they did was they basically password sprayed all the VPN users. And through that process, they were able to get successful. They tried to go to some of the servers. They didn't because the EDR blocked them. And that's where the alert come through. But I'll come back to that in a second. What they then tried to do was access 2 particular servers where they wanted to basically grab data. And the idea was, this is going back to credential leak on the dark web, which has become the quickest way for these guys to bypass and shortcut into an environment. And that's why, if you look at reports, you'll see how quickly now threat actors are able to, once they've got entry, how quickly they're able to laterally move because of the accounts that they're getting used to. So you see the what activity that they did, and at this point, an alert went off in our Cyber Fusion Center. So this was a customer of ours where basically the alert that came through, we spotted it straight away. And this is where time is of the essence. So from identifying the alerting, the detection, what do you do with it, the analysis required, you then start to see what is essential to then be able to mitigate in terms of the impact. So our analysts were able to understand, right, we can see who this is coming into the environment, but we need to get permission from the client to invoke incident response retainer team. So after some debate internally with the customer, and I guess they wanted to get all their ducks in a row, they were able to basically come back and said, yes, we absolutely need to invoke IR. By the time the team got in, they were able to guide the customer on, key thing was containment, right? Before, first doing the analysis, where have they got to? What have they accessed? Has any data been exfiltrated? Now, the good news here was that we were able to prevent them from actually getting access to 2 key databases that you could see they were trying to get into. And by the end of that evening, the success was that we were able to get the threat actor out of the environment. We literally evicted them from there. And again, it goes back to the human intelligence and experience that the team were able to demonstrate. And then the collaboration between our core Cyber Fusion Center analysts and then our deep experts on the forensic side. Lots of takeaways, not an exhaustive list, but sometimes just that one alert could be the game changer. So understanding, and that's where it's challenging, right? Because if you think of alert fatigue and like what do you look at? But this is going back to the point at the beginning of being able to know what threats are going to come at you so you just have your defense strategy in the right way. The first hour, it's called the golden hour when you're in any of you done any incident response planning and training. What you do in that first hour in terms of the bounce back and the response is absolutely key. So the right teams, have the tests been prepared and planned and practiced? The playbooks, are they in place? Do we have the right comms strategy and plan? These are all essential things. I won't go through all of it. But always remember, legitimate tools are being used more and more to help navigate and get into environments a lot quicker. So we, as defenders, are always told to do more with less. We don't have the budget, we don't have the people, the skills, and that's where it becomes really challenging on how can we ensure that the environment is protected the way it needs to. I would say these are basics, but you still, even in well-established organizations, you don't see as much of it being practiced. But what I would say is, if you think of the analogy of you don't put a $10,000 fence in to protect a $5,000 horse, or pounds, I should say. I don't know why I'm saying dollars. We're in the UK. The point is, know what threats are going to come at you based on your vertical, your technology stack. You know, what vulnerabilities are you dealing with on a day-to-day basis? And then, depending on your vertical you're in, there could be activists, hacker groups out there that specifically will target you. How do you prepare for that? How do you customize your use cases to be able to know when something like that is coming your way? And then the steps to do the governance is really key. Bringing people on the journey as early as possible. You know, preparation is always the best way in terms of how you can cover yourself. The intelligence, I'm a big fan of intelligence. I set up the SecOps and threat intelligence practice for us when I first joined Kudelski Security. No matter what bear variety it is, understand who could be coming at you and how best to defend against that. And I would say the best way to defend our organizations is it's not a one-man show, it's bringing everybody on that journey. So from the board all the way down to the person that Sarah referenced, clicking on an email and actually allowing a payload, bring people on the journey on what the risk is and how acting without thinking can have such a consequence. So be able to justify the budget you've also secured. It's not just about asking for more money, but being more robust on showing we were actually able to mitigate or stop this from happening because of these things you allowed us to do, whether that was a people awareness program, whether that was tooling, a combination, a tabletop exercise, whatever it is, because that will then reinvigorate the appetite to invest more and support your programs. And as you do that, I think it starts to take you on that journey, and then you have a sea change ultimately of what people are able to see and do. And I think last but not least, as I said at the beginning, us as a community, if you remember back in February, March of this year when the National Crime Agency were able to take down this particular threat actor, there were a few cases that we at Kudelski Security were involved in where we shared that intelligence with law enforcement, including the NCA. So that power of community and collaboration and sharing, I think it really helps us to go further as a team, stronger. And I think with that, thanks very much for attending and listening. And if there's any questions, do reach out. Thank you.